Hi, everyone. Today, me and Helevorn are reviewing the recent movie, The Northman from 2022, which we both have watched recently. And, I have done a full movie reaction. Well, not full, like I've reacted to most scenes, but not all of them, and a mini review at the very end. So if you want to watch that, check out the link in the description. But this is the first time that, I have been talking about The Northman with someone else. And Helevorn is the perfect pick for this podcast because she is a PhD in medieval literature and she has a lot of knowledge about Norse sagas. So we're going to first explore this movie by asking the first question. What were your expectations for the movie?
I have to say that my expectations for historical films portraying the Middle Ages are always very, very low. So, because usually these movies are all about epic fights and costumes and heroic protagonists that are supposed to leave you feeling uplifted, or at least that kind of movies where you just think, wow, this is so cool. Medieval people were so epic. I would love to have lived there. So, I'm not sure this is really my kind of thing. One of the reasons. My reasons for the low expectations is not necessarily, the clothing isn't accurate or the weapons aren't accurate. Because, first of all, I have a PhD in medieval literature, so I don't know much about how clothing looked, how the houses and the tools and the weapons and the ships looked. So, of course, I guess I have more knowledge than people who don't have any interest in the Middle Ages. But I mean, I'm not an expert. I would not be able to recognize, a ninth century sword from an 11th century sword.
Mhm.
So I'm not that picky about these things, and I know that a lot of people are, but I'm not. But then these really glaringly inaccurate costumes like those in Vikings, the Vikings TV show, that kind of bother me. So as long as it's not that extreme, the inaccuracies are not that extreme, they don't bother me at this level. But what I am more interested in is the mentalities. And this is what I like to see portrayed accurately, or in a way that is representative to the Norse spirit. And this is also something that is quite rare to get for most of these Viking themed movies. So I guess that this is what contributes to my really low expectations. So I did hear that a movie called The Northman was coming out, but I didn't even want to see the trailer because, okay, I normally hate spoilers, so I don't watch any trailers for movies that I am going to see. When I see the trailer, it means that I have decided this is a movie I'm not going to watch, so I might as well see the trailer. Why? Because trailers usually spoil everything. So if you see the trailer, you have more or less seen the first three-quarters of the movie. So I didn't watch the trailer. And honestly, after I watched the trailer, I was glad that I didn't because it showed some of my least favorite scenes. And it kind of seemed like that type of movie with Vikings that I don't want to watch. So I think I made a good decision in not watching it. So yeah, I had low expectations. Well, Robert Eggers is a great director and he makes the kind of movies I like to watch. So this was the only thing that lifted my expectations. It was the reason why I actually went to see it.
I see. As for my expectations, I think they were not that low because I actually didn't hear that much about the movie until you and Tete talked about it. And you guys both said it was really good. So I was like, okay, I think it is probably good then, especially since a lot of mainstream reviewers did not like it. So, a lot of people who are reviewing historical films, from what I know, they usually have certain expectations. They're usually expecting something like the Vikings, but probably more accurate and more action based, right? So if they don't like it, maybe this movie is quite unique. I thought maybe it's not, 100% to my taste, but maybe it's more unique than what you would usually expect from, a historical epic.
That's true, and it really was, and it owes a lot to the director who makes this kind of movies when he goes to medieval time, not medieval, sorry, historical times, and I really love that style, how it is artistic and how it's very immersive and out of the ordinary in terms of structure and visuals. So
Mhm.
I'm really glad that I got to see something so out of the box applied to Norse settings.
Mhm. So, our second question, how does it compare to other English language films about and media that we've seen about the Vikings, such as the History Channel's Vikings? We kind of already covered that in our first question, but
Yeah, I'm afraid that, that's always an example for how not to do Viking fiction, the Vikings TV show from pretty much any point of view that I can think of. So I guess this is nowadays a topic that people are very familiar with from video games and all of these movies, and I guess I wouldn't say it's oversaturated, but we needed something very different in terms of style, not yet another Viking movie. So when I saw the first scene from the beginning, I thought, wow, what a difference. Because we saw that the main character as a child, and his clothing has natural fabric and it seems plant dyed, and he actually has some replicas of Norse jewelry. So there is a huge difference from the very first scene from this point of view, because it really raised my expectations when you see someone in leather and with this fur on their shoulders that looks like a rug, then you know this is not going to be accurate. And I repeat, I said that I'm not that interested in weapons and clothing and such, but that shows a misunderstanding of Norse society if the inaccuracies are too glaring. So how can
Mhm.
something, show them in leather and fur, something like the Witcher, and then get everything else right? So you know. Interestingly, much better than Vikings is the Last Kingdom TV show, which, well, the protagonist is also dressed like that, and pretty much every warrior is dressed really, like a fantasy thing, like a D&D character. But beyond this, actually attitudes and social behaviors are much much better done than Vikings. Maybe it's because it takes place in England, because I saw that people, in fiction, they have an easier time portraying the Anglo-Saxons than the Norse people. Even there, the Norse are generally portrayed as barbarians, and this is one of the tropes that I really, really hate. And
Mhm.
well, from this point of view, I guess the Northmen didn't really bring much new, because we also see a warrior with no other preoccupations. Amleth has basically given his life to fighting and to taking revenge. So I guess it doesn't show many other aspects. I mean, very different aspects about Norse life that we don't usually see in movies. But the social attitudes and the outlook on life is actually excellent. There, it shows a great and deep understanding of it, and it really shows that Robert Eggers worked with a lot of specialists in the field.
Mhm, right. Yeah, I totally agree with the whole D&D thing. When you think of Vikings now, unfortunately, you just think of something that's basically fantasy, but they claim that it is history, right?
Yes.
Like something from a video game, like, just these very, kind of stereotypical outfits and, you're right, it does look like The Witcher. Now people think The Witcher is probably historical.
That's true. That's true. I know. I know. I know. Whenever you see these leather outfits and those leather wrist guards, and then the fur, which is not attached in any way to the rest of the outfit, and is like a rug on your shoulders, and they have this really ugly stitching. Like those people couldn't sew by hand, because sewing by hand is like sewing with a bone in prehistoric times. That's really terrible, because they could make some really really nice embroidery, and really subtle embroidery that rivals the machines that we have nowadays. So why do they always show those rudimentary stitching on their garments? It's horrible.
I think it's because they also got it really cheap on AliExpress. I think a lot of those costumes, they just got it for cheap from those places.
Yeah, I know, and the lack of helmets in battles, that's also really, really weird. So whenever you see those things, you generally know that that movie is not going for any kind of accuracy. It's just a modern and quite superficial understanding of medieval times.
Right. So the third question, how historically accurate was the film?
Okay, this is a very good question, because we get also to question, what is historical accuracy exactly? So, is it showing only those things that we have actual archaeological evidence from, or which are mentioned in historical documents contemporary with those events, or something that all scholars agree upon? Or do we take the sagas as being historically accurate because they were written by Norse writers in the Middle Ages? So I guess it depends on what you consider historically accurate. I would say that it is as accurate as the sagas. So, well, then this is from the start much, much better than any other Viking movie I think ever made. So, I guess that this is a great point. But, actual historians don't see the sagas as historically accurate, because they are fiction. They are adventure fiction of the time. And they are also, most of them portray, so they are historical writings in themselves, because they portray events that happened centuries earlier than the moment when they were written. So maybe some details are lost about how the world looked. So I guess it is as accurate as the sagas, and this this pretty much answers it.
That makes sense. And, I personally, from my perspective as someone who just doesn't really know that much about that period, I would say that it does feel pretty accurate, especially since, compared to all these other movies and TV shows that we've been talking about.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And I also saw in it depicted a lot of things that we know were real, and we don't see much of it anywhere else. So first of all, they use spears all the time, and we don't really see spears used in other movies. But this is like a weapon that everybody had at the time, and they were using simultaneously several weapons. So each warrior had several weapons on them, and usually in movies we just see that the fantasy format, like this guy is using an axe, this guy is using a sword, this guy is using two swords, this guy is using, I don't know, a crossbow, and this is really not how it worked. So and we see them using armor and helmets because they are protecting themselves, whereas in other movies the protagonists always have their heads uncovered, because people need to see their flowing hair and handsome features, I guess. So this is how it's definitely more historically accurate. And I guess the rest of the aspects, which are most probably not accurate, they are still very, very true to the sagas and to the Norse spirit. Even more unbelievable bits that we may think that are not accurate are actually things that are taken from the sagas. Like the moment when Amleth catches a spear in midair and throws it back. This is something that in sagas heroes do. And
Mhm.
as I heard, it is possible if you are a very experienced warrior. So also the Valkyrie with the swan feather cloak, it's also something, a description that appears in the sagas. And even the Valkyrie who has carved teeth.
Mhm.
There are skulls with carved teeth found in graves, and we have no idea why they had them. So there are great debates, but they applied it, I think, quite well to the Valkyrie. So they didn't say, because we found, I don't know, 10 skulls with carved teeth, it means that every Viking has carved teeth, right? They just show
Mhm.
it in a Valkyrie. Like, we have very, very few accounts of Norse people wearing tattoos. But then in a TV show like Vikings, everyone will have tattoos on their faces, on their heads. So these are some. They make some exceptions that are found. They make them seem very generalized. So
Mhm.
the Northman doesn't do that.
Right. Oh, so it was carved teeth. I wasn't sure what was on her teeth. It actually looked like braces to me, but I'm like, that's
Yeah.
weird. Like, did the actress forget to take off her braces when she was playing the role? I thought that was strange.
Yeah, yeah, so this is what it was. And I was really excited when I saw that, because I was like, oh yeah, I caught that reference. Nice. I read online some comments said that you need a PhD to understand the Northman. I really didn't
Well,
find
you
it
have
like
the
that.
PhD and you got it.
I know, but it's not really in that exact field. It's more like in Christian medieval English literature. So it's quite an adjacent field. So I'm sort of in the middle, a PhD in medievalism, but not really in that aspect. So
Right. And also I liked how, they mentioned Ruse because, I kind of knew that it was going to happen because I did watch the trailer and there was a part where he was wearing, the Russian tunic, the white and red one. So I knew he was going to Russia probably after he escaped his uncle trying to kill him as a kid. And I really liked how they showed that because I mean, I don't have that much exposure to Viking media in general, but it doesn't seem like they usually talk about Ruse, right?
that's true. That's true. That's right. Yeah, we don't see a lot of that.
Right. So it was good to see that as well because, historically that was part of their area.
Right, exactly.
Right. So number 4, what references to real historical events and sagas stood out to you in particular? We already talked about the carved teeth, but how about that part with Draugr, the sword from the dead man?
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's a great point, because that's one of the greatest scenes in the movie, I thought. Because yeah, Draugr really appeared portrayed like that in medieval sagas, and we have a lot of examples of that. And this is how you. Often saga heroes break into burial mounds, and they get weapons, and the weapons that they get are really fantastic things that have a symbolic meaning, and often have a name um, written on them. And they are swords that can do extraordinary things. And the way he kills the Draugr, this is also how it says in sagas, that you have to kill the Draugr. So I thought that was also really cool. And from an artistic standpoint, it was really nice how we don't really know if that uh, takes place in reality, the fight with the Draugr, or if it's just in Amleth's mind. And I really loved how the film, on the whole, played with the perceptions of the protagonist and the viewer versus what is actually going on, because we can say that it contains fantasy elements, but at the same time, they're not outwardly fantasy. So maybe this is just his perception.
Exactly. I really like that as well. It kind of shows us that they had a different mentality back then.
Yes, exactly, exactly. So, right, this is another thing that really stands out that from the saga as a part of those that we have already discussed.
Right. Was there anything else that stood out to you from sagas? What did you think of the multiple the male witches? I mean, we saw one Cirrus, but we saw two male witches. How did you find that, and how does that compare to your male magic practitioner, Aelf?
Right, I'm really glad that you mentioned that because I had almost forgot to mention it, even though it was one of my favorite things. So when I saw the male practitioner of magic wearing female clothes, I was really excited. And they didn't make it in a way that is immediately obvious because he was wearing an apron dress, which it is very, very feminine. I mean, not even my character, Eyolf Surav, which you can see behind me, who is a Norse practitioner of magic. Not even he wears something so outwardly feminine, but at the same time, it wasn't very exaggerated. So for people who don't know what apron dresses are, I guess he was just wearing a piece of cloth with some huge metal brooches. So it's something that people who are not versed in Norse literature and myth don't find very weird, but for someone who is, it's like, wow, that's a really nice touch, well done. Because women are the ones who practice magic. The realm of magic is the realm of women. So men in this field are often ridiculed, but at the same time, they can wield tremendous power, and Odin himself does this. And they people scholars think that the reason why they are shunned is because they take on feminine traits in their clothing. It doesn't say anywhere that they dress like women, but this is what scholars speculate is going on. We have in Norse sources the fact that they are shameful in their behavior and that they behave like women, but nowhere does it say anything in particular about the clothing. This is what it is assumed, also based on archaeological findings. And the witches, the female witches, had a very specific outfit, so it is assumed that the male ones were wearing the same outfits. And so that was a really great touch, and also the bracelets on their ankles and on their toes. These are archaeological findings, and it was really great to see that on a man
Mhm.
in the movie. About the Bjork witch, I'm not sure how accurate that is. I mean, obviously, the headdress that she is wearing would not have been preserved. It would have deteriorated in a millennium. So, of course, we don't know that they were not wearing this, but it doesn't look Norse to me. So, I don't really know what was going on there, and the painted faces as well. I'm not sure what was going on.
Mhm. Yeah, that one was a bit surreal. It kind of almost seemed a little bit Native American inspired.
I know, I know. So I was thinking that maybe they're trying to make it a bit Sami because a lot
Mhm.
of witches and sagas have Sami origins, but she doesn't look Sami either. So in
Mhm.
the outfit, so I'm not sure exactly where they were going, but anyway, it was nice. I mean, the scene was great and Björk was great, so I
Mhm.
guess I guess that's not a problem.
That's true. Which of the two male witches did you like better? The one at the beginning when Amleth is a kid, or the one who is older and then, he kind of produces the head of the first one?
Ah, okay. Yeah, the one with the dress, who has the head, the mummified head, because we all actually have in Norse myth the trope of the mummified head who gives wisdom, right? So Odin has the head of Mimir, who was killed, and he is still speaking and giving words of wisdom. So I think that was my favorite part. The ritual at the beginning, I think it was interesting because it showed a lot of shamanic elements, which we know existed in Norse ritual practices. And I think it was very interesting as a rite of passage because there's this whole idea of King Aurvandil. He knows he's going to die and he wants to make Amleth follow him as a warrior, and he assumes that he will be killed and that someone will take advantage of his weakness. So he's preparing his son to succeed him, and this is
Mhm.
exactly what happens when they go out of the cave. And I think they were ingesting some hallucinogens because it's very surreal, and they have these out of body experiences. And this is how the trances of magic practitioners and of Odin himself are described in Norse sagas, and also that. The thing which Amleth does all throughout the movie, imitating dogs, right, and wolves. This is also something that appears in these kind of rituals, and we have magic practitioners making sounds and imitating the behavior of animals, and then they get into a trance-like state where they adopt the characteristics of that animal, like the strength of the bear or the speed and the ferocity of a wolf, or they can run as fast as a reindeer or something. So yeah, I also thought those were really nice touches.
Mhm. They were, yes. So how did you find the score of the movie?
Well, I loved it because it's very mysterious and it's subtle and it's grim. It's not that type of majestic, uplifting score like Wagner, for example, because I don't think that really illustrates Norse times very well. Because I think that the music illustrates the harsh life of a Norseman who is orphaned and exiled and enslaved, and he dedicates his entire life to revenge. So I think this is what it suggests. Of course, not everybody's life was that grim, but this is a revenge story, and it is following this character who is obsessed with it. So this is why the soundtrack is also quite grim and mysterious to illustrate these juxtapositions between reality and hallucination or perception, subjective perception, and mysticism as well. So, because historical accuracy is the key of this film, of course, the score uses ancient instruments, the tagelharpa and the langspiel, and these airy and earthy effects. So I think it was perfect for the style of this film. Did you like
Mhm.
it?
I think so. I actually barely paid attention to the score because it felt so natural. It's not like, superhero movies where it's in your face, the music.
I know, and somebody said, I don't remember who, but it was a specialist, that this is the key to a good musical score, that film score, that it should be so well integrated into the movie that you don't really hear it.
Exactly, yeah, instead of suddenly you hear hip hop and, like, I don't know, some random stuff.
That's
Exactly.
true.
So what number 7, how did you find the cinematography? We sort of covered this already, especially about the hallucinatory, episodes, but in general, how would you find it?
Um, it was great, and it was these artsy inclinations of Eggers that I really loved seeing applied to a Viking setting, because I think they fit really well in how these surreal and mysterious scenes portray the magical thinking of the Middle Ages, and it's perfect. And the way the scenes are filmed, they are so fluid, and they have these very, very long scenes without any takes, which is something really difficult to do. And there are several of them. He is a director who has very long shots, And I think this is really interesting because, you know, most action scenes, especially fighting scenes, are, you know, they are filmed with these shaky handheld cameras, and they have really, you know, close-ups, or it's very dark, or everything is happening really fast. But here, these long fluid shots make you feel like um, you are really immersed in that, and you really had time to take everything in, and I loved it.
Right. I totally agree. I thought the cinematography was kind of slow and dark. It doesn't feel like, an action flick. And it kind
Mhm.
of just makes you kind of take in the environment quite slowly, which is good. It makes it more immersive.
I know. And I know that the fact that it's kind of slow paced was something that a lot of people didn't like about the movie, but this is actually what I really love, because this is what I wanted to see for a very long time. Because honestly, I'm tired of these action packed things that are so much focused on plot that they have, you know, virtually no characters, and
Mhm.
they don't let you immerse yourself in the world. Is just, okay, this is happening now, this is happening, and everything is
Right.
really fast with these really short scenes and close-ups to, I don't know. I don't know why that is, but I really
Mhm.
love that this one wasn't like this. And yeah, this is what I'm trying to do with my stories as well. It's of course different because it's words on a page versus a movie, but I think that this is the style that I'm also applying.
Right, absolutely. And I also don't like the mainstream movies obsession with, quote unquote badassery. I really do not like this word because it is for me just totally meaningless. It just means, some kind of explosion and then people with swords coming at each other dressed like fantasy D&D characters and they start screaming at each other and oh my god, he's so amazing or, strong badass woman kicks five guys down or something and this is why sometimes some people don't want to play or watch Viking stuff. It's because they always think about this whole, fighting obsession, badassery obsession.
I know, and there you always have these characters who always speak like, "Look at me, I'm so epic. Everything I say is so epic." So it doesn't really matter what they actually say. And what I liked here is that there's not a lot of talking, and the movie just lets the characters sort of speak from them for themselves through their actions. I mean, Amleth is a warrior through and through, and he is this really manly guy, so there's nothing there. It's just in the way that he was portrayed, in the way in which the movie is filmed and paced, that there is the difference. And in the dialogues, which aren't all that elaborate, I guess. I mean, not that dialogues in Vikings are elaborate, but there's just a lot of talking, a lot of meaningless talking. Instead of meaningless talking, let's just show really immersive and atmospheric scenes.
Absolutely. And it shows us, that a lot of the people back then viewed things very differently. And far from saying they are badass, this movie is actually deconstructing a lot of that, especially, this leads us to our next question, which is how did you find the female characters of this movie, especially Gudrun, Amleth's mother? How did the female characters compare to the male characters? What about the Maiden-King?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Well, first of all, in medieval literature, in sagas, there is very, very little emphasis on what the women think and feel and on their side of the story. So I love that here we had very complex female characters who are very realistic for the time period, and they act like women at the time, and like saga female heroes at the time would act, but here they are actually given screen time, so to speak, as opposed to the sagas. But this is what I really liked, and they are very interesting characters. I would say more complex than the men. wouldn't you say?
Definitely, yeah, just like Amleth's mother said, Amleth's father and Amleth himself are shockingly simple. While, they don't understand what she's gone through, they only see her as an object. So in my view, she's actually the most compelling character in the whole movie, and, she really gives a layer of depth that you would not expect from this sort of film. Because you usually just expect strong, kick-ass woman, like in freaking Vikings, right?
I know. Exactly, but that's actually a really strong kick-ass woman, which is also accurate, and it fits really well in that actual time setting, and not what, a modern interpretation of what the Viking people were like.
Right, exactly. So, the strength that she has is completely different from what, the Vikings TV show interprets as strength. She's not going on crazy adventures with like 10 swords strapped to her back and, like 10,000 men following her orders or something. Instead, she is someone who went through a lot of tragedy, a lot of trauma, and, she is just trying to survive. She definitely has her flaws, as we saw in that scene with her and Amleth, and she has a lot of trauma as well, and that expresses itself when she has to say things to Amleth and break the truth to him.
That's true, and I guess she seems as a villain for the most part until we understand her motivation. And we have this kind of female characters in sagas who are very powerful, but they are also kind of evil. But here we actually understand the trauma that is behind her choices and her behavior. So yes, she isn't a likable character in that subjective way, but she's a very compelling one, like you said, and not to mention Olga, who is a more positive character.
Definitely, yes. So Olga is one of the women that Amleth meets once he disguises himself as a slave to go to Iceland. And, she is a witch herself from Rus. And, she eventually befriends him and they fall in love. And, she tries to help him get his revenge. But she also gets the idea that it's not that simple, especially when it comes to his mother. She always had this feeling that his mother wasn't this victim that Amleth thought she was. Amleth always thought, she was forced into the marriage with Fionir, right? Is that his name?
Mhm.
Yeah, right. And that, she never loved him. She only loved his father. But in reality, it was the other way around. She actually wanted to get rid of King Orondil, and she wanted to get rid of Amleth too. And Amleth was sadly the product of sexual assaults. He was not a child she wanted. She had no choice in that.
Exactly, and it's really interesting because Amleth believes her to be a much more passive person than she actually is. She actually had a lot of say in how she lived her life. She took her own choices and followed her own way. And well, so she's not the victim that Amleth imagines her to be. And I thought this was really nice. Of course, because this is basically the Norse Hamlet. So in Hamlet, we see this as well. So even for those who don't know the saga but recognize the story from Hamlet, it is obvious that she will not be a passive victim waiting to be rescued by Amleth, right? Because Hamlet is the same, right? But I think that was really, really interesting
It
the way she is
definitely
portrayed.
was. How about the Maiden-King? Who do you think that's supposed to symbolize, and what do you think the role of the Maiden-King in a possible sequel would be, or a hypothetical sequel?
The Maiden-King, she is the daughter of Amleth and Olga, right?
Hmm.
So it's the Maiden-King is a trope in medieval Scandinavian literature. So it already seems like a very interesting and out of the ordinary character, right? So a
Hmm.
woman who is a maiden in the sense that she's not married, but she wields a lot of power on her own without the aid of a man. Of course, in medieval literature, these characters are mostly negative characters. I guess, sort of like the Amazon. So they are not someone you want to to be with or to be like. You know how medieval literature is has a strong didactic purpose. I guess these type of female characters are a way to show women you shouldn't be like this. You should be the nice wife, you know. So this is generally how medieval literature works.
Right.
So
So
who do you
it's
think she is?
well, I think that it's one of the twins that Olga's going to give birth to once she reaches Orkney. And you know, in Amleth's vision near the end, when he thinks about his family tree, she's at the very top, and you can see that she has a crown on her head, which suggests that she might become a Christian monarch, right? Kind of like Olga of Kiev, who, interestingly enough, was from that time period, and she's described as being of Viking origin.
Wow, that's really nice. That's excellent. Right. Yes,
Hmm.
I guess the Maiden-King is supposed to be Olga or of Kiev. This is really interesting.
Right, right. So, ninth question. How did you find Alga and her relationship with Amleth? What did it reveal about both of them?
I think it was really interesting in the way that they connected and collaborated with each other because they were in the same situation and they had to work together throughout the story for a common goal. So I guess they already have more of a connection than medieval people usually had when they formed a couple because you know they didn't have a lot of agency in this respect. So we don't have a lot of love stories that are more complex than this one in the sagas. So I guess in saga logic, this is a really nice love story. And what I found really, really interesting in the end is when Amleth chooses not to stay with his family, but to go back and fight to the death. And I thought this was very interesting because I think this is supposed to present him as a tragic character and to show him as a very a deeply traumatized man who spent all of his life killing and detaching himself for every other emotion than anger and the desire for revenge. And he also believes a lot in destiny, which is something very, very present in the Norse ethos. And destiny and honor and renown and often vengeance are very closely linked together. So I know that from our time, from our perspective, it's kind of strange that he makes that decision, but I think this is what they were going for. So
Hmm.
not only that a Norse hero would do this, but that he was a very traumatized person who he didn't know what love was and peace and security was, so he went with the familiar path, which is the path of blood and anger. So this is what he chose because this is what he knew all his life. So I think that it was interesting that he obviously loved Olga, but in a sense not enough as to stay with her, so he placed his mission over her.
Right. I think it's also telling how he says to her near the end that he never really had a close relationship with anyone. So you're right.
Mhm.
He doesn't know what love is. And maybe it scares him because he may not know how to communicate with anyone. He only knows how to speak in, vowels, basically.
Exactly, exactly. And yes, I do agree with you. What you said in your review that that scene deserved more screen time. We deserve to understand better how he thinks. I also thought it was quite short. I mean, it makes sense, but it was worth exploring his motivations more.
Mhm. Also, did you find that, the whole volcano thing was very forced? Me and Tete, we were talking about it last night, and, we thought that it felt very Do you remember that movie from the 2000s, you know, the Star Wars prequel where Anakin
Ah,
and Obi-Wan are fighting next to lava and then he gets pushed in there and he turns into, you know, later on he becomes Darth Vader because he is now
yeah.
disfigured, right? That kind of reminded me of that. I'm just like,
Darth
why does it have to
Yeoman.
take place so far away from the farm where all the violence happened, right? Realistically, wouldn't the home gang take place at the farm where all the violence happened and where, you know, Fionnuar's sons died?
I know that was, you're right. That was one of the things that's quite out of place. I mean, it feels like that was done to be, out of the
Epic.
ordinary. Yeah, exactly. So that was one of the few things that sort of seemed, okay, let's do this because it's cool and it will be great visuals. And also, why are they naked? They are naked, right? I,
Yeah,
I
I
didn't
didn't
get that
understand
part. That's
that. I guess
true.
it's because they're bearing their souls to each other because they lost everything, both of them, symbolically.
Yeah, I know. I guess that scene was meant to be more symbolic than realistic. And the volcano, I guess, symbolic for the anger and the all consuming desire for revenge. So I guess we can say um, that it had a symbolic meaning and it wasn't really meant to be realistic, hence the nakedness. So I
Hmm.
guess.
I didn't really like it. I honestly think the final fight scene should have been when he killed Fionnuar's sons and the wife, you know, his mom. I mean, after he sees their dead bodies, I think he should erupt into rage and they should just fight and die.
Yeah, yeah, I guess.
That
I
would be
guess.
better.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. So that was one of the scenes that felt more out of the ordinary. Oh,
Yeah.
out of place. Sorry. Oh, and also, you know what other thing I found really out of place? You know the berserker ritual where they were wearing
Mhm.
leather
Yeah.
speedos. Okay,
Mhm.
that was also really strange. I think that was my least favorite thing in the whole movie. So what was up with that? So yeah, I think that one and the scene that you mentioned here with the volcano, which I had forgotten about, those ones were out of place. I mean, I would replace them if I wanted to,
Mhm.
give suggestions for how to improve the movie.
Right. And another thing I did not like was how, you know, it was so abrupt how, you know, he went to the Bjork witch and then suddenly he's like he has this idea to disguise himself as a slave just to go to Iceland. That was very, very forced, especially since, you know, if he is someone who is kind of respected in the berserker community, why would he give up all of that just to exact revenge? He could find another way to go to Iceland. He doesn't have to, you know, put up with the indignities of being a slave.
Well, okay, that really happened very quickly. So I also think that you are right in that it happened really quickly. But I know, I mean, I think I have an idea why he made that decision. The whole thing with the berserkers, okay, how shall I put this? So berserkers usually in Norse sagas are negative characters, so they are not considered good people. They are considered very impulsive and uncontrollable people who can, and unpredictable people who can do anything and hurt anybody. They have no loyalty towards anyone. So I understood his time with the berserkers as a sort of a self-exile. So it's not something that he enjoys. It's rather that he was traumatized by all the violence that he had witnessed, and he thought, I'm only good for killing. I am a killing machine, so I'm a monster, and I'm going to ally myself with these other monsters. So he had no purpose in life than to do mindless killing. Of extraordinary violence, because they were normal Norse people. Normal Vikings were not as violent as the berserkers were shown over there, so they would not kill women and children. They had a code of honor. So even when they were, um, you know, um, fighting other people, they would not normally harm women and children. okay, maybe they would rape and enslave them, but in Norse times that wasn't seen as really that bad. But they would not kill women and children like they were doing there. So I think this was the point, to show that the berserkers were really evil people, and Amleth had become evil. He had gone down a very dark path. So the moment when
Mm.
he meets the witch, he gets a purpose in life, and he says, okay, I don't have to do all this mindless killing. Now I have a purpose. Now I remember my purpose and I know what I have to do. So this is how I see his choice.
Right, but would there be another way for him to get to Iceland since, he is someone, I guess, who wants I guess, because, he's not someone who's used to being a slave, right? So, I mean, the willingness to put up with that, is that realistic or believable?
Hmm, that's a good question and also quite
Couldn't he just
difficult
be a
to answer.
merchant or something and just go on a ship with the other Norsemen to go trading in Iceland, and then there he just disembarks and then he finds the farm and kills everyone?
I guess that could happen, but I guess he could take some of the loot that he has there and just say that he wants to trade them and buy himself passage on a ship. I guess he could have also done this. That's true. But then I don't know. Yeah, maybe that would have made more sense. You're
I
right.
mean,
I
he
haven't
doesn't have to
really thought
disguise
about it.
himself as anything or put up with bad people treating him badly. He could just, literally be a shadow watching the farm and just randomly killing animals to kind of psychologically torment them at first and then start killing people one by one.
That's true. So I guess the part where he is a slave, I guess it could have been done in a different way. I mean, I do imagine that this is something that saga heroes would do, because sagas are basically medieval adventure movies. They're not
Right,
movies, but they are
exactly.
the equivalent of adventure movies. So I think, again, it's realistic in terms of sagas. So if Norse people would see that in a saga, they would be like, "Oh wow, this is such a cool story." So,
Mhm.
but I'm not sure anyone would do this if they had any other chance. Yeah, any other.
Exactly. I guess, like you said, for some sagas, this actually happened, and I said that in the movie reaction too. Olaf, for example, who makes an appearance in your novel, Sons of Disobedience, he is an actual historical slash saga figure who used to be a slave before becoming a king. So, this kind of slave slash king dichotomy is something that exists.
Yeah, definitely. Olaf Tryggvason, yes, was king of Norway at the end of the 10th century. Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Right. Because we were talking about the likelihood of that. I remember a few months ago or even last year, and we're like, "Oh, it's so strange that, someone who used to be a slave could become a king." But now we see a movie that explores the possibility of this and the reverse of that, a king becoming a slave.
That's true. That's true. So I guess that this is also because the hierarchies in a Norse setting are not. Um, so I guess if you are a slave, but if you have the qualities to rise in society, and if you have the bloodline, then and you can gather supporters, you can sort of do that, since monarchy is not hereditary.
That's
So I
true.
guess this is why this is happening. So when
Mhm.
there is a king, it's not compulsory that his son will become the next king. Maybe somebody else has more supporters and they will be sort of elected the next king. So I guess this
Mhm.
accounts for why these strange, from our perspective, shifts in social position can happen.
Right, that makes a lot of sense. And, what did you think of the fact that, what was I gonna say? I forgot. But yeah, any other questions that we have about this? Especially the pacing and how the plot developed at certain parts before we talk about the final question, which is what's your rating?
This is really difficult. I'm not good at rating movies. I never do that, not even mentally, because I think it's so subjective. I mean, of course, I love Viking fiction, so would I give it a five because it's the best uh, piece of Viking fiction? I wouldn't, because it also had some flaws, but then compared to other movies, Viking or not, it was actually really good in terms of cinematography as well. And the respect for the culture in terms of historical accuracy really ranks high. So I'm not even sure. But then, is it my favorite movie of all times? No, it's not. I'm not even sure I have a favorite movie. So I'm really not good at ratings. It's a 4 point something, but I'm not sure what.
Yeah, I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. You know, if it would be 5 out of 5 if the whole slave thing was explained more, or you know what? If they actually had a more natural transition, maybe he got defeated by someone and then he got captured as a slave. And then he just so happened to be sailing towards Iceland. And then he suddenly gets a vision that, oh, my destiny is getting fulfilled now. It's not like him
Mhm.
suddenly trying to become a slave so he can go to Iceland. He was just taken there by chance. Would that be better, I think?
Yeah, that's true. That's right. So I guess we can take away 0 0.1 for everything that we found that was out of place. So I would say the leather speedos definitely deserves a minus 0 0.1, and then that thing that you mentioned, and the volcano scene, and what else was it? Anyway, it's like a 4.5, I guess, for me.
Yeah, exactly. I think those are the main issues. And also I think some of the scenes stretched out a bit too much, especially when they were at the farm. Like the whole, the Valiant baseball game thing with the kid nearly getting killed. Like, do you think that was sort of necessary or not? I mean, kind of because, he saved the kid, but I thought the scene was too long.
That's true, and I'm not sure it had such an important purpose. And also, yeah, it's really nice that they showed the Knattleikr game, but at the same wasn't really as violent, especially not in that in that way. I mean, such games are seen as when you want to portray that that person is a berserker or something, the person who does the violence, but it
Mhm.
would be really out of the ordinary. So it was not really meant to be a violent game, not more than American football, for example.
Exactly. I thought that was a little bit sensationalist.
Yeah, that's true. And also, slaves were not normally treated that badly. I guess they were more
Mhm.
like indentured servants. I mean, okay, in this movie, I guess it made sense because they were from the Kievan Rus, so they were not Norse. But Norse slaves were not treated extremely badly as slavery goes, you know?
Mhm, that's true. Well, that kinda makes sense. That's how Gudrun became queen, right? Because she was Norse.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
but someone, a lord, could marry a slave woman. It wasn't very out of the ordinary. Of course, normally marriages were about alliances, but the fact that he married a slave woman, I guess, showed that he was more romantic, I guess, in the logic of the time, because it wasn't really an arranged marriage.
Right, and she said that he didn't care about her class, Fionir.
Right,
Right, but
exactly.
King Orundville, he only cared about, I guess, her looks or something.
Yes.
Yes. And she was praising, "Oh, Fionir's actually really good. He's actually the good guy." I was reading some reviews, that, you actually kind of feel like Fionir's actually kind of less worse than Amleth at some times. And you kind of feel sorry for him that all of this is happening to his family.
I don't know, I guess I never thought that. I never thought that he was a good guy. But, maybe when I watch it the second time, I'll see the point in that.
Yeah, I think honestly both are bad, and both are driven. I think Amleth more by this kind of vengeance, while Fionir's kind of just mostly defending himself at that point.
Yeah, that point. So minus the whole horrible murder in the beginning of the movie, I guess he sort of repented for that in a way. So yeah, I guess in Norse logic, Amleth really is a hero. But then what's nice about sagas is that um, the characters are very flawed. They are always very flawed, and they always do bad things. I mean, even from the point of view of that time. So they are written to be morally gray characters, and sagas, as opposed to other medieval writings throughout Europe during those same centuries, they don't have a strong didactic purpose, which is really good because they are stories for the sake of stories and of characters, and not in order to prove, this is what you should always do. This is good and this is bad. This character is good. This character is bad.
Mhm.
So yeah. Also, we have a question. Have you noticed from
Yes, I
someone?
did.
I
Yeah.
just noticed it.
Yeah, I did.
Um,
We can answer it right now if you want.
Yeah, sure, sure. Well, first of all, I'm not sure that talking about a Viking movie means glorifying Vikings. Glorifying Vikings would mean showing what they do as good, whereas I think that this story shows them as very morally gray, as do my story is. My own story is about Viking fiction, so I about Viking settings. Sorry, so I'm not sure we're glorifying Vikings. And also, Vikings and Nazis really have nothing to do with each other. I mean, the Nazis inspired themselves from their past because this was an ideology of the Nazis,
Mhm.
taken from romantic nationalism, in which every country all over Europe were glorifying their historical past. So, of course, the Germans were glorifying the Germanic past, and that in itself is not bad. So the fact that some evil people took inspiration for Vikings doesn't make the Vikings bad.
Mhm.
They were
Mhm.
just as bad as everybody else in the Middle Ages. Those were
Mhm.
different times with different morals. Of course, would see today we have a different view of what's good and what's evil, and also talking about the past, whether it's Vikings or Nazis, isn't a problem. We have to know the past in order to know not to repeat the mistakes.
Exactly. And, the Vikings never really thought about race like that. I mean, yes, there was this idea of outsider versus insider, Kievan Rus, for example, versus themselves, the Norse, but they didn't see humanity like the Nazis did. The Nazis had these huge handbooks about, the length of someone's nose divided by the length of their jaw, or like some weird like algorithm for calculating,
Yeah.
someone's race based on the measurements of their face, for example, which actually, actually had a lot to do with how America saw race too. They actually kind of influenced each other. American racial science, quote unquote, was actually co-influenced by the Nazi eugenics. So they actually both sort of co-influenced each other. But yeah, that's a totally 19th and 20th century thing. And in both cases, America and Germany were looking for scapegoats to kind of pin all their problems onto, a couple of different ethnicities.
That's very true. Whereas this did not happen in Norse times, Vikings did not do that. And in what other way are they evil? I heard a lot of people saying that they had slaves, so that's evil. I mean, okay, they had slaves in the 10th century, as did other parts in Europe, but then slavery was abolished there much earlier than it was in America, for
America.
example. So,
Yeah.
by these standards, does it mean that all Americans are evil just because they had slavery? Also, there was slavery in Europe. The Roma people were slaves until the 19th century. So, does that make all Europeans more evil than Vikings? So
Hmm.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think there is a sensitivity to the Northmen in America, from what I've read, because some people on the American right, people who are white nationalists or alt
Mhm.
right, they have started appropriating Viking imagery because they feel like it represents their heritage. And this has nothing to do with the Vikings. Those people are not not historians. They haven't done their research. They are just using a symbol to kind of signal to other people with their ideology that, hey, I don't agree with, for example, mass immigration or the left or whatever. They're just using it as a symbol, kind of like how the Nazis used the swastika, which was from India, to kind of symbolize their own twisted beliefs.
That's true, and these people are, I think, always. I mean, I'm pretty sure always very badly informed. They have actually no idea and no understanding of what Norse people actually were and what their creed were. So they are just, people just taking out random bits of information and projecting their own values and ideals onto them, sort of like what the Nazis did. But this is hardly
Mhm.
the fault of the Norse people.
Exactly, right. But yeah, that was an excellent discussion, Thank you so much for coming on, Helevorn. We really explored a lot of things and a lot of questions that I had after watching the movie 2 nights ago.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and it was really awesome to talk about this movie with you finally, because we have been planning this for long, and it was really, really exciting. Thank
Yep,
you.
thank you so much. Bye.